This is Mary McGovern, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar overview of DLA's First Destination Transportation and Packaging Initiative. Janet Hearn of the FTDPI Program Office will walk you through the basics and then answer questions. So without further ado, let me hand the presentation off to Janet.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Mary. The intent of today's webinar is to make information available to the PTAC counselors across the country about DLA's First Destination Transportation and Packaging Initiative, also called FTDPI. We need your help in getting the word out about this new initiative to the suppliers who presently serve or are interested in serving DLA's aviation, land and maritime, construction and equipment, and industrial hardware supply chains. That would be Class 7 principal end items, Class 4 construction and equipment, or Class 9 repairables. Today's fiscally constrained environment has mandated that DLA take action to improve our business model. As background, DLA's director set out specific goals for significantly reducing the costs of material acquisitions across the DLA portfolio of materials. The first phase of the initiative was First Destination Packaging. It rolled out on March 18th of 2013, and to date, 75% of all the awards within the targeted supply chains are being received with commercial packaging. To explain, this initiative converts, wherever possible, the requirement for military standard packaging to commercial packaging, according to the regulations that are set in ASTM D 3951. Now, this packaging method, established by the American Society for Testing and Materials, that's the ASTM, is already in use for direct vendor to customer or DVD deliveries, or also DLA CONUS customers. This initiative reduces the cost of packaging materials for the suppliers, or even more, the costs that are associated with outsourcing those finished products to specialized packaging houses. This initiative reduces the amount of packaging material that's dumped into landfills, and thus lessens the government's carbon footprint. And this initiative will save valuable time for our suppliers and allow for shorter delivery schedules. Please alert your PTAC clients to pay close attention to our current solicitation documents to make sure that they know that with very few exceptions, commercial packaging is acceptable to us. Now let's go to 3 working examples. I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. So let's take the first example, which is the brake shoe. We currently purchase about 16,000 brake shoes a year. And if you look on the left-hand side in the picture, you can see that the brake shoe fits kind of snugly in a box, and there's not a lot of extra to do about it. It's just a brake shoe in a box. But if you look at the right side of the screen, the military packaging, there's craft paper around the brake shoe and then a plastic wrap around that. Now, that's not so much maybe the materials cost, but when you look at the cost of labor to repackage that, the difference between the labor and packaging, military versus commercial, is the difference between $4.53 for each one of those boxes or $1.50, making a total bottom line savings of $3.03 on each brake shoe. And you can tell when you buy a significant number of items that that is over time a significant cost that's reduced. Let's take the next example, filters. We buy approximately 1 million filters a year of different types. This just happens to be an oil filter. But if you look at the commercial packaging on the left, the oil filter stretch wrapped to hold a gasket of some sort, with it, and it's put back in the box, or it's put into a commercial box. But if you military pack it and you add the extra plastic wrap to it, then it no longer fits in the standard box and has to go into a specially manufactured box. The difference between the labor and materials cost of the military packaging versus the commercial packaging is the difference between $1.78 per filter and 54 cents per filter. It's a bottom line saving of $1.24 every time you package a filter. When you're buying 1 million filters a year, that's a significant savings. And let's look at the last example, which is the tie rod. Now, if you look on the left-hand side, again, commercial packaging, a little bit of craft paper there, but on the military packaging, a lot more craft paper, Again, taking it out of the box, wrapping it up with extra material, putting it back in the box is labor intensive. The unit price for one box with a tie rod is $2.10 versus the commercial packaging of 70 cents for a savings of $1.40 each time the tie rod is packaged. It's a savings on 28,000 steering tie rod ends that are purchased every year, or a significant savings. That was the first initiative in packaging. Now let's go to the second phase of the initiative, which is First Destination Transportation, or FDT. It's scheduled to roll out to suppliers with solicitations and awards effective October 28, 2013, just around the corner. Suppliers will see the term FOB origin in their solicitations beginning in late October, and because FOB origin relieves the suppliers of the responsibility for shipping, they should no longer include the transportation costs in their bids. But what a benefit it is to the suppliers. First, imagine that you're actually located in California. You receive a solicitation for material delivery that's supposed to go to the Susquehanna Depot at New Cumberland, Pennsylvania, and you know that your biggest competitor is physically located, say, in Reading, Pennsylvania. And in the past, maybe a supplier would have declined to bid knowing that the cost of transportation would have kept them from being competitive. Now the playing field's leveled, so please explain this new benefit to your clients and encourage them to bid. The benefit to suppliers doesn't stop there, though. We know that it costs our suppliers money to pay transportation costs up front. Now, I'm no accountant, but I do know that any time I have to pay a cost up front, even if I'm billing it back or including it in the cost of the goods, it's money that I temporarily don't have toward labor or overhead or raw material costs, research and development, or any of my core competencies. So that's important. And negotiating carrier pricing takes up valuable time. The constant fluctuation in fuel prices probably causes a bit of anxiety when auditing freight invoices. And under the FTDPI program, suppliers aren't responsible for providing proof of delivery. We picked it up, we provide the proof of delivery. Elimination of all of those steps should be especially beneficial to all the PTAC clients who are small businesses. So you ask, what are the benefits to DLA? Well, the Department of Defense moves volumes of freight to second destination locations, to military bases and troop locations around the world. And for years, U.S. Transcom has negotiated rates with commercial carriers based on those volumes of business that we have to offer them. Those transportation rates are very good rates. And if we manage our own inbound transportation and take advantage of the increased volume that we'll be offering to our transportation partners, and if we allow our suppliers the opportunity to bid just the material costs, we save valuable taxpayer dollars. Now let's go back to those same articles that we used in the packaging examples and look at the savings that we could expect to see on the transportation side. So let's start again with the brake shoe. Let's just go with what you might typically order as one pallet load of brake shoes. And let's assume that 54 brake shoes would fit on one LTL pallet. The savings for each pallet would be $97.34 if you compared the commercial rate with the government transportation rate. And if you break that down into the number of brake shoes that we're purchasing on that pallet, 54, the unit savings would be $1.81. When you compare that to 16,000 brake shoes purchased annually, that would be a savings of nearly $30,000. Let's go to the next slide and look at the example of the oil filter. Again, let's assume that we're using just the LTL quantity of purchasing filters and that 504 filters would fit on a pallet. And the savings per pallet would be $121.37, or for each filter on that pallet, a savings of 26 cents. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're buying 1 million filters a year, you could save in excess of $250,000. When you look at the last slide, or the tie rod steering ends, we'll assume that 120 tie rod ends would fit on one pallet. The savings on each pallet, and this again, we're looking at typical shipping. The savings on one pallet of 120 tie rods would be about $68.28. If you break that down into the number of tie rods on the pallet, we're looking at about 57 cents. Again, doesn't sound like a large amount, but when you're buying 28,000 tie rods a year, the savings is again around $16,000. The suppliers should be paying close attention to those solicitations and know that with very few exceptions, commercial packaging is going to be acceptable, and that they should be looking for solicitations starting the end of October with FOB origin clauses, and that means that they no longer have to be responsible for the transportation costs in their bids. Now, as PTAC counselors, you're going to want to explain to your clients how they'll now make arrangements for a truck to pick up the materials that they're selling to DLA. And here's how. The suppliers will schedule their pickups through DLA's Vendor Shipment Module, or VSM. VSM is DLA Distribution's vehicle for scheduling the carriers, accessing the supplier's contracts, and the carrier rates. It's a web-based tool. It can be accessed by supplier cage code for order entry, and then later to print the necessary documents. The suppliers need a personal computer, they need access to the Internet with Internet Explorer web browser, and a printer. More than 2,500 suppliers are currently registered for VSM, and about 100,000 transactions are being handled by the system every month. Multiple shipping locations can be supported using VSM. Shipment histories are maintained. VSM is a secure system. There's a help desk personnel available to train or answer supplier questions. There's an email address for the more patient and computer-savvy users' questions. The only real requirement, again, is a computer, an Internet connection, and a printer, since you can now print your bills of lading, your shipping labels, packing lists, and if a DD-250 form is applicable, that prints as well. First, the suppliers have to sign up to use VSM, and this is how that's done. They would first log into https://vsm.distribution.dla.mil. And over in the upper left-hand corner, I know this slide's a little small, but in that left-hand corner, it says New Vendor Application. You would click on that, and then the suppliers would use their cage code. And if they have more than one cage code, they would have to register all of their cage codes. Then once they're in that system, they would fill in the required fields, and when they're completed, click Submit. Then VSM will respond to the supplier with 2 emails. The first is a registration confirmation, and the next one will contain a password for accessing the system. If the PTAC clients have questions or need help with the system, they can send an email to delivery@dla.mil or phone that help desk at 800-456-5507, Monday through Friday between the hours of 6 a.m. and 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Once they've registered, the contracts that each supplier has already been awarded will populate to the website. And to arrange the transportation, the supplier merely signs into VSM, chooses that contract number for the items that they need to ship, and they complete the required information. The information they need to include is the origin and destination, the NSN, the number of pieces, the dimensions, the weight, and any special instructions. And once that's been received, DLA's transportation personnel will provide the supplier the date and time of pickup along with the pickup carrier name. And at that point, the supplier can go back into VSM and print the bill of lading, the packing list, shipping address labels, military shipping labels, small parcel label if that's applicable, and the DD-250 form when that's applicable. So, in other words, contractor shipping just got easier. Now, I trust this webinar has been helpful, and I want to thank all of the PTACs for your interest in and support of DLA contracting. Please encourage your clients to register for VSM just as soon as possible, and tell them to watch out for solicitations with transportation terms FOB origin. Let them know that they'll be able to sharpen their pencils, help DLA reduce costs, and be rewarded with additional business opportunities. I want to thank you for your participation in today's webinar, And at this time, if you have questions, I will be happy to address them.
All right. The first is the VSM system integrated with wide area workflow? Is it standalone? Is it DLA unique, etc.?
VSM is not currently affiliated or tied to wide area workflow. They're two separate systems, and the same procedure for going into wide area workflow to put in your invoice information, that will still have to be followed. So unfortunately, I wish that it were more compact, but it is a separate system.
Likewise, there's a question, is VSM registration separate from DIBS? Okay, yeah, DIBS is the DLA's Internet Bid Board system, and that's a
that's to pull your solicitations out?
Right.
Yeah, that would be separate.
Okay. Another question, we have a business who is a transportation broker. How would they register in VSM to be a delivery company?
Let's see. We have contracts with transportation companies, and they would have to be on contract with us as a transporter. And I think that's what the question was. How would they become a transporter?
Yes.
Yeah, they would have to have a contract separate with the transportation group in order to become a transporter. I could get you that information for how they would, work with SDDC or our U.S. Transcom group in order to be able to get a contract for. Okay.
Will we still need to populate a receiving report in wide area workflow, or will the VSM take care of that information, such as RFID info, PAC, etc.?
I am not familiar with the receiving report, but my understanding is that whatever you put into wide area workflow at this point in time, you would still be responsible for doing that.
Okay. Another question, are contracts automatically populated to VSM by CAGE, or does the contractor have to load them manually?
They're automatically populated. And in the event that you would go into VSM and your contract would not populate, you have the opportunity to put in your contract number, and then someone will manually review it.
Okay, here's one. Is this new program only focused on depot NSN sales, or does it apply to contracts for non-NSN sales?
I'm not familiar with a non-NSN. Do they mean direct to customer, vendor to customer sale?
But Gordon, I'm going to unmute you so that you can follow up that question too. Gordon, are you there?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we are only dealing with DLA depot contracts where contractors are bidding to produce NSN stock items to the depots, as opposed to a open contract going to the DLA. Maybe they are building a custom widget to deliver to a particular fort, or they're providing some other commercial off-the-shelf product. But there are many, many DoD contracts that do not go through DIBS. Is this only a DIBS issue, is my question.
No, my understanding is, and I will clarify that, my understanding is as long as it's in the supply chains that we mentioned, aviation, land and maritime, construction and equipment, and industrial hardware, that it would be included as long as it's going within the continental United States.
Thank you.
Okay. A question came in, what about current contracts? So if someone already has a contract, presumably with deliverables extending out into the future.
Long-term contracts are not immediately part of the FDT program. However, they will be accessed and looked at and determined whether or not there would be a benefit to both the supplier and DLA to modify those contracts to change the transportation terms.
Very good. And one more, since DSM creates DD-250 and wide area workflow receiving report could be required, what happens when a government source inspection is required, since there's a signed document required?
Yeah, nothing changes. If it has to be inspected at origin, it will still be inspected at origin, and the DD-250 will be signed off on. So that will still flow through just as it always has.
Okay, and then I have a comment. To the super improvement for DLA vendors. Tell Vice Admiral Harnachek, well done.
We will. Thank you.
Here's a follow-up to the DD-250 question. QAR is signed electronically in wide area workflow now. And
they still will, too. My understanding, and I'm more of a transportation person than I am a purchasing person, but my understanding is that when it's origin inspection, if a DCMA representative inspects it in person, they sign off on the form, and it's a paper form, or there's a signature that's in the wide area workflow. But that paperwork, I'm not familiar with where the actual hard copy goes, but my understanding is that that is an automatic process that will not change. It's just that to get the 250 form, you would pull that out of VSM with your printer.
The question is, how will this affect our transportation companies?
Well, that's a very good question. I would imagine that in many cases, small businesses that you're working with will have developed some relationships with carriers, but not to the extent maybe that the larger businesses have. And some of the carriers that you're using, the brand names that you hear all the time, will already be affiliated with the government, and it'll just change the way that they're doing business, not in so much as what you see every day with the carrier coming in and making the pickup. It'll just be the transformation into who's actually paying them and making the arrangements.
Another question is, how do you do partial shipments, and how far ahead do you need to set up the truck?
We want our contractors or suppliers to still meet their CDD dates or their contract delivery dates. So pretty much we anticipate a certain number of days for shipping. So say from California to Pennsylvania, you and I as transportation folks would probably say, well, that's probably a 7-day trip, but our folks allow for 9 days so that they can allow to consolidate shipments or make arrangements, et cetera. So pretty much it would be rule of thumb, the regular contract times plus maybe a day or two.
Will RFID labeling still be required for commercial packaging?
Yes, it will. And I would say on that note, if RFID is required today, it will still be required. One of the things that you'll want to do is watch your contract for any packaging information that appears on the contract.
Well, Janet, I think that's all for today. Fine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today.